I got a whole big list of rankings risers and rankings fallers from Heath and Jamie, and let's get right to it. Heath, you told us about Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and Jaylen Warren, but there are a lot of players here that we haven't talked about, including Geno Smith, who on CBS is QB 17, on Fantasy Pros is QB 16. Geno Smith is a riser for you.
Yeah, and it's just like I didn't have a lot of huge movers, but I did move Geno ahead of Aaron Rodgers. Man, JSN, you're talking about another guy who has had some wow moments the first couple of preseason games, including in week 2. It's just a reminder of how special a talent he is. And you pair that with DK Metcalf, you pair that with Tyler Lockett. Listen, there's probably a 15, 16, 17 QB1s this year. Geno Smith's definitely one of them. And I would not be surprised. Like, there's been talk about how much is he going to regress from last year. He might be better than he was last year.
When you guys are drafting a quarterback in that range, if it's Cousins, Geno, Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, I don't think we're going to put like Russell Wilson in that group, but maybe whatever. Is there anything that determines who you pick? Is it, if I already have my QB1, I take this guy. If I don't have a QB1 yet, I take this guy. Do you just mix it up? It's just, those guys are tough, I think, to differentiate from each other. How do you guys differentiate them?
If I don't have a QB1, I'm taking 2 of them. Typically, the one that I'm looking for with the most upside is Daniel Jones, because he does something just a little bit different with his legs. So if you're going to get another 700-yard rushing season from him, and then he does improve slightly as a passer, then you're going to be very happy to have Daniel Jones on your team if the sort of carryover from the Brian Daboll coaching plus the addition of Darren Waller is there. But I think if you don't get one of those guys, like, to me, Cousins is very similar to Dak. And we've had this conversation, so we're actually doing tiers today on CBS Sports HQ, quarterback tiers. And I don't usually do tiers, but I had to give them for the show. And so my final tier of the starting group, I did put Cousins, who's my QB 13, in with Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott. And so those are kind of like the fallback top 12 guys, per se. So it's a, baker's dozen essentially. Once you get past those guys, though, I think Geno, Jones, Rodgers, and Goff, they all could be top 10 guys. I mean, they're all capable of that. It's just a matter of who will fall out of that group, if you're banking on somebody else. And obviously ADP tells us something differently, certainly on our site, where Tua Tagovailoa and Anthony Richardson are not being drafted as starters right now, which is very surprising. Right. So I think, again, it's sort of, if you need a second quarterback, like I wouldn't necessarily, and this is probably a mistake, but I wouldn't necessarily want to pair Daniel Jones with Anthony Richardson, because there could be too much volatility there. But like, if I take Anthony Richardson, I'm looking more at the safer options, just in case Jones does falter. And last year was kind of a fluke, which doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but you never know.
Yeah, it's pretty much for me, it's Jones or Geno, just because Cousins goes earlier usually in the drafts that I'm in. But I have Cousins, Jones, and Geno in a tier, and then I have Rodgers and Wilson and Goff in a tier behind those guys. So I usually, if I draft one of those guys, it's Jones or Geno, and it's usually after I've taken Tua or Richardson.
Right. Richardson is in ADP. He's with this group. For us in the rankings, he's way ahead. I guess I'm a little unclear about Cousins. Jamie, you said he is with the starters, so he's ahead of them. How about for you, Heath? Is he definitively ahead of Geno and Jones?
I've got Jones, Cousins, Geno back to back in round 10.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry. All right. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are risers for you. And that's interesting. I actually didn't give this note. Baker Mayfield didn't play, but Todd Bowles said he's not naming a Buccaneers starting quarterback.
Drafts look good.
Is that why Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are risers for you?
It's a couple of things, and it's more projections changes. But also, I do think that like Trask gives them a little more floor than I was. If Trask was awful, then they had the floor of bad Baker, which we know how bad that is. We saw it with DJ Moore last year. But there was a couple things. The Russell Gage injury causes me to think that the targets are going to be a little bit more concentrated. And then, like, I don't know that I've gone into this year thinking Tampa Bay definitely wants to run it a lot more than they have when Tom Brady was quarterback. Their run game looks awful. I'm not sure that they are going to be able to run it very often, even with Rachaad White. So I've upped their pass volume just a tad, but concentrated their targets more as well without Russell Gage there.
Michael Thomas is a riser for you.
Yeah, getting good reports. He's staying healthy. He looked good in the first preseason game. It was again a small move, but I did move him up a little bit
to a top 100 pick.
Yeah, he's a round 8 pick for me.
Okay, that's Michael Thomas. Would you rather have Michael Thomas or Odell Beckham?
Thomas.
Romeo Doubs or Michael Thomas?
Ooh. They are within 3 spots in the overall rankings, but I've got Thomas slightly higher right now.
I mean, that really should tell you about the value that people can get for Romeo Doubs. I hope it continues to be that way. I don't know how much he'll rise in ADP. And 2 tight ends on your risers list, Chigo Okonkwo and Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, Musgrave, just moving him up into that top 20 range where maybe he makes a difference. Both still just a tight end too. But there's just been too much of a drumbeat to completely ignore him at a position where it doesn't take that much to become a top 12 guy. And then Okonkwo, like there was at the beginning of training camp some talk from Vrabel that didn't sound super positive. And then there was the signing of DeAndre Hopkins, and I kind of cooled on him. But he has played 100% of their snaps when they only have 1 tight end in the field, which is a big change from last year. And now that Burks is not going to be there at the start of the year, I think there's a little more opportunity for him to get off to a good start. So Okonkwo back in that borderline top 12 range for me.
All right. Again, Heath's risers, Geno Smith, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Jaylen Warren, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Chigo Okonkwo, and Luke Musgrave. Let's head on over to Jamie's risers. Jamie's got 2 quarterbacks on his list, Jordan Love and Kenny Pickett. ADP has Jordan Love at about quarterback 25 or 26, Kenny Pickett at QB 21. Where are you moving Love and Pickett, and who do you like better?
I like Love slightly better than Pickett, but I still love Pickett. But I think you look at the just the way these guys have played, and the offenses that they're in, and I don't think we give Pickett the love of what he might do with his legs as well. He did run quite a bit, or a good enough amount in college that you can potentially buy into that. That he might do, be a 300, 400 yard type of rusher. But I think just look at the weapons that these guys have. I think they're worth drafting as quarterback 2s with upside.
And as far as Love goes, we don't want him to make bad throws because someone's going to pick it.
True.
Right? Okay. And you said you moved them ahead of Ryan Tannehill.
Yes. So they were, I think, 20. I think I had it Howell, Tannehill, Love, Pickett, and I just moved Tannehill behind those guys.
What about Matthew Stafford versus Love and Pickett?
I have Stafford ahead of those guys, but again, I think it's a matter of what you're looking for, floor versus ceiling. So Stafford, I think, gives you a safer floor if he's healthy, but that's the risk you have to worry about with him.
All right. Let's go to your wide receiver risers, George Pickens, who you talked about earlier, Michael Thomas, also a riser for you, and Jaden Reed, who you talked about earlier, and Paris Campbell of the New York Giants. I only said that because people might not know what team Paris Campbell plays for. Yeah. Michael Thomas, though, you share that sentiment with that Heath. You're feeling good about it?
Well, it's funny because, I had sent you that note. I forget where it was from at this point, but I'd sent you that note last week where there was a lot of concern about Michael Thomas. And apparently he did bounce back, I think, that day in practice. And I think it was one of the Saints beat writers was saying that.
I got it for you if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff Duncan, he said, a former NFL receivers coach asked me from the sidelines today, what's up with Michael Thomas? He can't get off the line of scrimmage. He's getting locked up by a safety. And then he says, my column on the reality of where Michael Thomas is at his return to the playing field after 3 years on the sideline. And that was for NOLA.com.
Yeah, so I had dropped him about 4 or 5 spots, and I just put him back exactly where I had him.
Why?
Because there was some video of him actually looking good, and some of the reports the next day. Maybe he was motivated by that. I don't know what it was, but it was the next day or two. He looked good. And so it's just a matter of if he's healthy, he's worth drafting with a mid-round pick. You don't get overly excited about Michael Thomas at 30 years old, having played 10 games over the last 3 seasons and say, okay, I'm going to jump all the way back in like we did last year. We got burned, but he's still capable of being a quality receiver. And I do think he's getting better quarterback play this year with Andy Dalton gone.
I do wonder if Michael Thomas literally read the quote that Adam read, because the tape I saw was of him breaking Derwin James' ankles. And the quote says he couldn't get off the line he couldn't get off the line against a safety. I wonder, because they've been practicing together. I wonder if it was James locking him up one day and then Thomas getting his. That's a pretty good safety too.
Yes, no kidding. All right, and then Paris Campbell. I don't know. I guess Giants wide receivers in general. Darius Slayton didn't do anything. Isaiah Hodgins had a long catch or like 18-yard catch or something. Paris Campbell is their slot guy right now. Who's your favorite Giants wide receiver?
My favorite Giants wide receiver is still Hodgins because his role is locked in. But I had been somewhat bullish, I guess, with the hope of take the chance on Wan'Dale Robinson when he comes back, and he's a guy that this regime drafted and, hopefully, but he's still on the PUP list. At this point, it's hard to overlook that Paris Campbell's got that role. And I think the one guy that's going to take it from him would be Shepard. And so we'll see if that's the case. But I think if you're looking at their 3 receiver sets at this point, he's the slot guy. And we know what that's kind of been to Daniel Jones. So is he going to be the Shepard slot receiver where it's been the only guy there? No, because I think Waller is a significant upgrade over anything that Daniel Jones has ever played with. But I think Paris Campbell is he in PPR, he was like in my 190s, and Wan'Dale Robinson was like around 170 something. And so I just basically flipped it and took Wan'Dale Robinson out.
Honestly, Jalen Hyatt, if Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't think is worth waiting on. Jalen Hyatt, though, is surging and playing with the starters. So I didn't think there was any chance Jalen Hyatt was going to make a contribution this year. Are you guys getting excited about him?
Like half of these guys aren't going to be able to play.
Right.
Right.
Well,
you can't play 7 wide receivers in a game.
I mean, at this point, like Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, obviously we're not counting on them. It's Shepard,
Slayton and Hodgins are locked in, right?
as of now, but Hyatt, could certainly get on the field. But yes, I'd say Slayton.
Do you think he's more likely to take Slayton's job or Hodgins?
Slayton.
I think Campbell's. I think he could play out of the slot. But Slayton's, I would say, then more likely Slayton's than Hodgins. But I don't know. They have
what I heard earlier in the year was that Slayton was like the one guy who was locked in.
Hyatt is more similar to Slayton, I think, than to Hodgins. But I think we're probably spending a little bit too much time on this. I apologize for that. Juwan Johnson, a riser for you, Jamie.
Yeah, other guys getting great reviews, and just looking at it, what he did last year, the quarterback he has this year, I'm drafting him as a starter. He's moved ahead of Dalton Schultz for me, which is a guy that's falling. And again, when you're taking these late round shots, who's going to be somebody that can maybe hit? I think he fits the profile. Former wide receiver, had a good touchdown season, not a great touchdown season, but did well finding the end zone last year. And, Heath talked about this last week with A.T. Perry, just about the Rashid Shaheed injury. I think their top 3 pass catchers right now, if everybody's healthy, are Olave, Thomas. We'll see Kamara, but I think Juwan Johnson's that third guy. And so I think, the fact that, forget about the Jimmy Graham situation, hopefully he's okay. But, they do have a lot of guys there, but I think all you're hearing is just great things about what Juwan Johnson has been doing, and I think will continue to do once the season starts.
And Greg Dulcich is someone that Chris on FFT and 5, Greg Dulcich was a loser for Chris. And you guys like Juwan Johnson better than Dulcich at this point?
Yes, that was something that I changed after last week's preseason game, but yes, for sure.
I think I might still have Dulcich ahead, but I have a hard time. And I guess it's probably just because I haven't projected a massive increase in pass volume for the Saints. But if Michael Thomas is there and Chris Olave is there, I have a hard time seeing, and they're going to throw it to their running backs, how Juwan Johnson's going to see more than 4 to 5 targets a game.
Well, Dulcich was the guy that Chris was just saying is not playing enough, basically.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's just something I just want to throw that out there because I don't think he's in the note. Oh, he is in the notes. He's one of your followers, Heath. Greg Dulcich. Sorry about that.
Yeah. He definitely moved behind Okonkwo. I moved him behind Gerald Everett. I've got him at tight end 18 now. I could be tempted to move him 5 more spots. You get into that 18 range, and the difference between that and 23 is just kind of guesswork at tight end. But it's not good that he's not a full-time player.